Hey guys, tonight we're slipping on a stiff leather mask, stuffing it with spices and sorrow, and heading into a world where the air itself might kill you. The year is somewhere in the 1340s, and you, of all people, have just agreed to become a plague doctor. Yes, you. No experience required, just a strong stomach, a tolerance for horrific smells, and a willingness to work dangerously close to people whose skin is falling off in chunks. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, what time is it where you are right now, and what country are you listening from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The knock comes just after midnight. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Your breath catches. No one in your village knocks after dark unless it's important, or horrifying. You light a stub of a candle, casting flickering shadows across the walls of your small stone room. The scent of smoke mingles with the more permanent background aroma of mildew, unwashed wool, and fear. Outside your door stands a man in a black robe. His voice is muffled, polite. He introduces himself as a city clerk. You've been chosen, he says. Or maybe volunteered is more accurate. There's been talk of your prior training. You once apprenticed with a barber surgeon, right? You could write your name without drooling? That makes you one of the educated elite. He offers a sealed letter with an official-looking wax stamp, a contract. 3 months of service as a plague doctor. Pay guaranteed. Room and board. Bonus if you survive. You hesitate. Of course you do. Because you've heard the whispers about the Black Death. They say it rides on the backs of fleas and in the breath of the dying. They say once it touches you, you're already halfway gone. But also, your roof leaks. Your pantry is mostly weevils. And, just between us, you haven't had a solid bowel movement in 4 days. So, you take the letter. By dawn, you're walking into the city gates. And they reek. The city smells like sweat, rotting cabbage, urine, candle wax, and the tang of uncollected death. Pigeons strut fearlessly between piles of refuse, while rats treat the alleyways like royal boulevards. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls steadily, once every 2 minutes. A death knell. Someone is always dying. You're escorted to your new quarters, a bare, drafty room next to the infirmary. You're handed a small chest containing what they call your professional supplies. It's filled with dried herbs, curved knives, and a packet of chalk. You don't ask why the chalk is there. You'll find out soon enough. The next hour is a blur of briefings. You're told you'll visit homes, record symptoms, and sometimes, dispose of the dead. You're also expected to do what you can. Nobody defines what that means. Honestly, they don't know. You catch snippets of medical theory from other practitioners, miasmas, bad humors, planetary misalignment. Historians still argue whether anyone actually believed half of these ideas or were just grasping at anything that sounded official. You're handed scrolls of Galen's writings, but most of them are about treating balance by inducing vomiting or sneaking in leeches. Charming. And then comes the mask. You stare at it in disbelief. A long leather beak, stitched with waxed thread, lined with cloth pouches stuffed with herbs. It looks more like something you'd wear to rob a falcon than treat patients. But it's meant to keep you alive. Clove, rose petals, mint, juniper, even a few drops of vinegar. All packed tightly into the beak's hollow interior. The theory is simple. Bad air causes sickness. So if you breathe good air, you might stay safe. It's adorable that anyone thinks this works. But hey, it might. You put it on. The first thing you notice is how much it weighs. The second, how it narrows your field of view into 2 tiny dark circles. Everything is hot and foggy and smells like oversweetened wine. Your voice echoes inside the beak, slightly terrifying you. And the leather hood? It makes your scalp itch immediately. Your reflection in the polished brass of a kettle nearly makes you drop the thing. You look like death's intern. Still, the uniform has its perks. People instinctively back away when they see you. You're simultaneously feared and needed. A contradiction stitched together with black thread. The first patient you see is a child. No older than 6. She's lying on a straw mattress, cheeks flushed with fever, her neck blooming with black-purple buboes the size of eggs. Her mother stares at you with eyes that scream help her but a mouth too scared to speak. You kneel beside the girl and pretend to examine her. There's nothing you can do. Not really. You touch her forehead, boiling hot. You listen to her breathing, shallow, rattling. You scribble something in your ledger because that's what doctors are supposed to do. The mother watches every move like it might change the outcome. And then the girl coughs. Wet. Close. A tiny mist of spittle lands on your mask. You freeze. That could be it. That single breath. You leave the house in a daze and mark the door with chalk. A large X quarantine. No one enters, no one leaves. You lean against the alley wall and breathe deeply, forgetting for a second that all you're inhaling is your own recycled panic and clove. By nightfall, you've visited 7 homes. 5 are already corpses. 1 is a priest coughing up blood while clutching his cross like it's a weapon. The last is a woman with no symptoms at all. Just fear so thick you can feel it pressing against your mask. You write her name in your ledger anyway. She asked you to. Said she didn't want to be forgotten if things went badly. In your room that night, you strip off the mask and gloves with trembling hands. You burn the gloves in the hearth, as instructed. You clean the beak with wine-soaked cloth, though you've started to suspect this is more ritual than remedy. Dinner is a crust of bread and a piece of smoked eel. You chew slowly, trying not to imagine the child's cough. As you fall into bed, the city bell tolls again. And again. You realize it's been tolling all day, non-stop. You drift into uneasy sleep with that sound embedded in your brain, like a metronome counting down something you can't quite name. You wake to the scratch of a rat chewing something it absolutely shouldn't be chewing, probably the hem of your robe. It scurries off when you sit up, leaving a fresh trail of droppings near your boots. Good morning, plague doctor. You still ache from yesterday, like every joint signed a separate resignation letter overnight. But there's no time to stretch or sigh. Your mask waits by the door, its leather stiff and shiny from the vinegar rub down. You're already late. Today's lesson? Getting into full gear. You've seen what happens when a doctor forgets a step. One guy, young, too confident, skipped the waxed gloves and touched a patient's skin. 5 days later, they found him slumped over his desk, face down in a pool of ink and bile. You pull on your thick linen undershirt. Then come the boots, heavy, oiled, and buckled tight to your calves. Over that, the robe, treated leather, dyed black, thick as a cow's hide. It creaks with every movement and smells like mildew layered with a soupçon of week-old stew. You belt it tight, tuck your pouch of dried herbs into one side, and loop your ledger onto the other. The gloves are last. You tug them on, fingers snapping into place. And finally, the mask. You pull it over your head and tighten the straps behind your neck until the world narrows into the familiar double tunnel vision. A fog of mint and rot floods your nostrils. You breathe slowly through it, like a swimmer getting used to cold water. No mirrors this morning. You don't need one. You already know. You look terrifying. On the way out, you grab your walking stick, part scepter, part boundary enforcer. It's not just for poking the sick and fending off aggressive villagers. You've heard some doctors use theirs to check if a person is actually dead before touching them. You're not above giving a sleeping patient a nudge just to be sure. As you step into the street, the sky is the color of wet ash, and a low fog clings to the ground like a curse. A rooster crows somewhere, but even that sounds cautious. Your first visit is to a tailor's house. The door is already open, hanging on one hinge. Inside, scraps of fine cloth litter the floor, velvets and silks no one will buy now. The tailor lies on his back in the center of the room, unmoving. You poke him with your stick. He moans, still alive. For now. You kneel. The mask creaks as you bend forward, the beak brushing the air above his face. His skin is blotched, his neck swollen, and there's a smell rising from his body that's almost sweet, like fruit left out too long. He tries to speak but only wheezes. You pretend to understand, nod once, and stand. The ledger comes out. His name goes in. You hang a rag soaked in lavender oil above his bed. Not because it'll help, but because his wife begged you to do something. Before you leave, she presses a coin into your gloved palm. You think about giving it back. You don't. Outside, two children run past with painted wooden swords, giggling. One of them wears a crude bird mask made from paper. You're about to smile, until you realize they're chasing a third child who's coughing. You yell at them to stop, voice muffled through the leather. They scatter like mice. On your way to the next house, you pass a baker tossing unsold loaves into a barrel marked with a red cross. Unsanitary food disposal. Or plague bread. Hard to tell. You make a note to skip baked goods for a while. Next stop, a midwife's cottage. She meets you at the door, arms crossed, lips tight. She refuses to let you in. You're a bad omen, she says. People die after you visit. You could argue. You could remind her that people are already dying. That you're just a witness. But you're tired. So you nod once, turn, and chalk her door anyway. Back on the main street, a man hauls a cart of what used to be furniture, now firewood. Everything burns now. Even family heirlooms. Even books. Especially books. You ask him where he's headed, and he says, the pit. You follow him. The plague pit is a wide trench just outside the city walls, dug by prisoners and widows, filled by desperation. It's half covered today, with new mounds of dirt and limbs poking out like accusations. The smell hits you like a wall. Your mask filters some of it, but not all. Your stomach heaves anyway. A priest stands at the edge, reading from a Bible. His voice is hoarse, his hands shaking. The man with the cart dumps the load into the trench. Two wrapped bodies, tied with ropes. You don't ask names. You head back through the alleys, avoiding puddles of liquid you refuse to identify. Cats hiss from doorways. A dog follows you for 3 blocks, then vanishes. You arrive at a boarding house where 5 tenants have taken ill. The landlord meets you outside, visibly sweating. They're not my problem, he says. They haven't paid rent in weeks. You nod. He offers you vinegar to rinse your gloves. You accept. Inside, it's dark and humid. You knock on the first door. No answer. The second, a groan. The third, nothing. You push it open and find a woman sitting on the floor, eyes glassy, her dress soaked in something foul. You kneel beside her, but she jerks away. I'm not sick, she shouts. You believe her. Mostly. Her skin looks pale but clean. No swelling. No cough. You ask her name. She says Isolde, then starts crying. You sit with her for 5 minutes, not touching, just sitting. When you leave, you mark the building. This time, you chalk a question mark. Back at the infirmary, the other doctors are already arguing. One insists the plague is caused by sin. Another blames earthquakes. They disrupted the air. A third is trying to catch and dissect a rat. You offer nothing. Instead, you sit, clean your mask, and stare at the crackling fire. The beak rests on the table in front of you, empty and hollow. Someone passes by and drops a leaf of fresh sage into your herb pouch. You mutter a thank you. They nod, exhausted. Dinner tonight is barley stew with what may or may not be meat. You eat it anyway. Before bed, you reread yesterday's ledger. 60 names, 30 crossed out. You try to pray, but your brain won't stop listing symptoms. You fall asleep with your gloves still on. That night, you dream of birds. Hundreds of them, all with human eyes, all wearing masks. You wake up to the sound of shouting. Someone's banging on the infirmary door, screaming about a miracle or a disaster. Hard to tell at first. Everything sounds muffled inside the mask. You don't rush. There's no such thing as a good surprise in this job. By the time you emerge, the shouting's moved down the street. A woman claims her son rose from the dead. You've heard this before. Usually it's a mistake, sometimes it's shock, and occasionally, yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. One time, a man sat up in a plague cart just as it reached the pit. caused 3 heart attacks and a dog to run away forever. You step into the cobbled street, fog clinging low around your boots like it's trying to warn you away. But you keep walking. That's the job. Today is a city round. Every few days, you're expected to do random checks on the neighborhoods that seem quiet. As if quiet means safe. In this city, quiet often just means emptied out. You walk past shuttered stalls and windows boarded from the inside. The market square is abandoned except for a fishmonger whose wares are now more maggot than fish. He waves. You don't wave back. You pass a man standing on a stool, preaching to nobody. His arms are outstretched, tunic torn. He's got a bucket of ashes, which he flings over himself every few minutes. You make a note. The city likes to know who's lost it entirely. 3 alleys later, you spot something worse than madness. Silence with motion. A shutter creaks open, then slams shut. You see a hand draw a curtain aside on the 2nd floor of a bakery. A child coughs from behind a hay cart and scurries away like a shadow. They are hiding. From you. You're not just the plague doctor. You're a symbol. A warning sign in boots. That becomes painfully clear when you knock on the next door and are answered with a thrown chamber pot. It misses, barely, and shatters beside you, splashing God knows what across your robe. You freeze, then calmly reach for the chalk. A large red Q this time. The house is officially under quarantine, and anyone who enters does so at their own risk. You move on. By midday, the sun's tried to burn through the clouds but gave up halfway. The light is more glare than warmth. You sit on a broken barrel to rest and eat an apple from your pouch, dried, mostly skin and seeds. It crunches loudly in your mask. You miss cheese. You visit a home on the edge of town, wealthier than most. There's a carved archway and real glass windows. A maid lets you in, holding a lavender-scented cloth to her nose. Her eyes dart between you and the floor. She doesn't speak. Inside, the master of the house lies on a bed of goose down, breathing through parted lips. His eyes flutter open when you approach. He tries to speak but produces only a rasp. You lean closer, adjusting your mask slightly, and catch the scent. Faint, sour, wrong. His wife hovers at the doorway, wringing a lace handkerchief that's long since lost its usefulness. "Can you save him?" she whispers. You could lie. You could offer honey water and prayers. Instead, you place a hand gently on the man's shoulder and say, "I'll make him comfortable." Which is plague doctor for no. You leave them with sage burning in a silver dish and a page of instructions. Mostly common sense. Isolate him, burn linens, no contact. Not that it'll help. The disease is faster than logic. On your way out, the maid hands you a coin wrapped in silk. You don't refuse. In the next street, you spot something odd. 3 people digging. Not a pit. A hole. They're burying something small. You approach slowly. It's a cat. Black-furred. Stiff. You ask why. They glance around, one of them whispering. They say cats carry it. We're cleansing the street. You bite your tongue. You know that's not true. In fact, scholars now argue the opposite. That cats might have helped keep the rats down. Historians still argue whether the cat killings spread the plague more than the plague itself. But try explaining that through a beaked mask to people whose brother just died in a coughing fit. You nod once and walk on. Your next stop is a tannery. The smell hits you a full block away. Urine, lime, dead animal. Inside, it's even worse. The tanner's apprentice is sick, lying on a pile of leather strips. He's young, 17, maybe. His skin is pale, lips cracked, and his fingertips blackened at the edges. That's new. You write it down. He stares at you as if you're an angel or a demon. Is it bad? He asks. You lie this time. It could pass. Will I go mad first? You pause. There have been stories, people ranting, hallucinating, clawing at invisible insects. Some say it's the fever. Others whisper of the devil. You answer carefully. You'll sleep a lot. It'll be gentle. He smiles, as if that helps. You leave before he starts convulsing. You've seen that look before. Outside, the air somehow feels heavier. A bell rings. Not a death bell. This one's faster. Urgent. You follow the sound to the city's western quarter, where a house is ablaze. Flames dance through the thatch roof, and neighbors form a rough bucket line, tossing water and prayers. You ask what happened. Plague house, someone says. We burned it. No one knows who started the fire. No one cares. Sometimes, the best way to disinfect is to destroy. You stay to watch until the roof caves in. Ash floats into the sky like black snow. You imagine someone's family photo burning inside. A doll. A recipe. A life. Evening creeps in quietly. You walk back through streets now darker, the lamps few and far between. No one lights the candles anymore. Oil's expensive, and light brings hope, something in short supply. As you pass the cathedral, you see a line of people waiting for confession. The priest's giving absolutions through a crack in the door. He wears no mask, just a cross and a look like he hasn't blinked in a week. You stop by the infirmary one last time. The patient list has doubled. 2 doctors are missing. No one talks about it. You remove your mask with shaking hands, wipe it down, and collapse into the straw mattress. The ceiling above you is cracked in the shape of a spider. It stares. You try not to. Your hands ache from writing, your legs from walking, your soul, well, you try not to dwell on that. You fall asleep wondering, if they bury you, will they mark the pit? Your hands are already numb by the time you unlatch the infirmary supply chest. It's early. Not that early means anything anymore. The sun hasn't shown its full face in weeks, just a sulky smear of gray across the sky that lets you know time is technically passing. You're alone in the storage room, and it smells like vinegar, damp cloth, and something vaguely metallic. Maybe old blood. Maybe not so old blood. You open the wooden box labeled Instruments of Treatment. A noble title for what's essentially a medieval horror show. First comes the lancet, tiny, delicate, and deceptively clean. This little blade is used to cut into buboes, which is just as charming as it sounds. You're supposed to slice the swelling open and drain the poison. A polite way of saying, stab the boil and let the pus run out. You examine it closely. There's dried something on the edge. You scrape it off with your glove and move on. Next is the cautery iron, a long, blackened rod, meant to be heated and pressed to wounds. Sometimes used after you lance a bubo, sometimes used just because you've run out of options and it looks impressive. The idea is to draw out infection with fire. What it really does is traumatize the patient into unconsciousness and fill the room with the scent of seared human skin. Still, it gets results. Sometimes. Then there's the bleeding bowl. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. According to Galenic theory, which is still holding court in medical circles despite being centuries out of date, the body is made of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it's because one is out of balance, usually blood. So obviously, the solution is to remove some. You've got half a dozen knives specifically for the task. They vary in curve and edge. Your personal favorite is the one with the bone handle. It doesn't slip when wet. There's a pouch of dried leeches, too. Supposedly, they wake up when placed in warm water and can be applied to draw blood naturally. You tried it once. The leech refused to cooperate. It may have been dead since the last bishop's coronation. Nestled beneath the knives and pokers are more unusual items. A toad, dried and strung with a bit of cord. According to an Italian herbal text, placing a toad on a patient's chest absorbs excess pestilence. You've never seen it work, but it does make the patient stop talking. A handful of amulets. One has a carved crescent moon, another a Latin phrase misspelled 3 times. People sometimes insist on wearing these during treatment, and you're not in the business of denying comfort. Even if it comes from a chicken bone wrapped in string. You find a jar of crushed emerald powder. It's expensive and rare. The theory is that precious stones contain purifying vibrations. Mixed into wine, this concoction is supposed to protect against illness. It tastes like regret and does nothing, but nobles demand it anyway. And at the bottom of the chest, your manual. A handwritten collection of notes from previous plague doctors. You leaf through it with reverence. Some of the pages are stained, torn, or barely legible. But the entries are priceless. Vinegar-soaked rags over the face may lessen miasma. Replace often. Wormwood under pillows to keep sleep free of spirits. Do not trust the bishop's apothecary. His powders cause vomiting and hallucinations. Historians still debate whether plague doctors actually had any training or just carried props to calm the public. Based on this manual, you're leaning toward mostly props. With your tools packed and strapped, you step into the hall, where another doctor is already suiting up. You nod in greeting. He nods back. No words. You haven't spoken in 2 days. Not from rudeness, from survival. Talking wastes breath and increases risk. Today, your assignment is the Southern District. Dirtier, poorer, and more desperate than most. It's where the healers tend to rotate quickly, because no one lasts long there. Your first house is already marked. A red X smeared across the door, but the ink is faded. You knock anyway. No answer. You nudge the door open. Inside, the air is thick with stillness. And that smell. You know it too well now, the sour-sweet odor of death. You find the body in the corner. A woman, curled up, arms wrapped around her knees. No visible wounds. Just gone. You check for signs. Bruises, swelling, bleeding. Nothing conclusive. Sometimes, it just takes people. A shadow passes, and they're gone. You chalk the wall and move on. The next house is worse. Inside, a man lies tied to a bed. His arms are lashed with rope, legs bucking spasmodically. His eyes are rolled back, foam at his lips. His sister pleads with you. He's gone mad, doctor. The devil's in him. You've seen this before, delirium, possibly from fever, maybe even from some infected wound. You check him over. A bubo the size of a fist bulges at his thigh, already dark. You make a decision. You order hot coals from the hearth and set the cautery iron inside. His sister watches in horror as you heat the rod until it glows. Then, without flinching, you press it to the edge of the bubo. He screams so hard the plaster on the ceiling cracks. The smell is instant and unforgettable. You only manage half the procedure before he loses consciousness. You leave instructions. Cool cloths. Chamomile tea. A prayer. And the name of a gravedigger, just in case. Outside, a crowd watches you leave. Silent. Suspicious. You ignore them. Your third stop is a miracle, or close enough. A boy with early signs. Rash, chills, headache, but no buboes. You administer a mixture of vinegar and crushed rose petals. Not because it works, but because it's something. You tell him to drink boiled water and stay isolated. He asks if he'll be okay. You hesitate, then say, probably. It's the best thing you've said all day. By late afternoon, your instruments are dirty, your gloves are sticky, and your robes feel like they weigh 100 pounds. You stop at a fountain and use some of the communal vinegar to rinse your tools. A woman gasps at the sight of your blade and clutches her child tighter. You finish your rounds with one last visit. A mid-level merchant who insists he's just got a touch of the summer heat. He's drenched in sweat and smells like rotting fruit. You prod his armpits with the stick. Yep, swollen. You leave him with herbal tea and instructions to stop touching every coin in his drawer. Back at the infirmary, the apprentices boil your instruments. The smell makes you gag. You peel off your gloves, your robe, your mask, layer by layer. Underneath, you're soaked with sweat. Your hands shake. You rub balm into your fingers. Lavender and rosemary. It helps. A little. Dinner is onion soup, thick with garlic and old bread. You eat slowly, grateful for warmth. Before bed, you write in your own manual. A new entry. Mixed tea of wormwood, vinegar, and dried fig. Gave to boy, 10 years. Mild symptoms. Will follow up. May not help, but gave him hope. You seal the book. Wash your hands. Lie down. Tomorrow, the blade will come out again. And again. And again. You don't even need to check the roster anymore. The moment your boots hit the stones outside the infirmary, someone waves you toward the east end of town. It's an older woman, one of the herbalists who still dares to walk the streets. Her fingers are stained green with crushed leaves, and she doesn't meet your eyes when she speaks. Too many in that quarter, she mutters. Smells worse than usual. Worse than usual. You march through the winding alleys, the familiar rustle of your robe against your legs like a metronome marking the day's descent. People vanish into doorways when they see you. Some spit. Some pray. One child runs up to hand you a scrap of parchment. It's a drawing of a bird-faced figure with red eyes. It's surprisingly well done. You pocket it. Your first house is thick with incense. Someone's been burning myrrh for hours, maybe days. A woman meets you at the threshold and blurts, "Tell me, do the bruises mean she's dead?" You follow her into a cramped room where a girl lies curled on a straw-stuffed mattress, skin pale except for purpling splotches scattered along her arms and thighs. Ah, yes. The signs. You crouch, inspecting her carefully. One eye is open, just barely. She's not dead. But you understand the confusion. She's halfway there. You breathe slowly through the beak, inhaling cloves and rue. This is where diagnosis becomes performance. You know that most people, once the fever starts and the swelling begins, don't recover. But they want answers. They want confidence. You brush her hair aside with the end of your stick. Her forehead is cold, not clammy. You nod once. She's still fighting. You leave them with a vial of wine mixed with vinegar and tell them to boil water constantly. Whether for steam or superstition, no one's sure anymore. And you write her name down. You write a lot of names these days. House after house, the scenes blur together. Sunken cheeks, swollen necks, people muttering prayers in corners, the heavy silence of anticipatory mourning. You learn to spot the different types of plague, the bubonic, with its signature swellings, the pneumonic, where people cough blood and infect with just a breath, the septicemic, the cruelest and fastest, which turns people black and cold within a day. Some scholars, even now, debate whether these were distinct diseases or variants of the same horrific organism. You don't care what they were. You care that you can tell how much time someone has just by how they sit up in bed. A man slouched and blinking slowly? 2 days, maybe 3. A child with skin flushed and eyes darting around like a trapped animal? Probably survives. A woman who hasn't moved in hours and barely reacts when you knock a stool over? Don't even unpack your kit. You develop your own shorthand. NSP for no sign of pus, WB for watch breathing, GR for grave ready. You use it sparingly, but it helps. Keeps you distanced. Until you meet the weaver. She's about your age, mid-30s, though she looks older. Lines cross her face like cracked linen. Her husband opens the door and immediately apologizes. She wouldn't let me call for you. Said it was just a summer cold. You enter. She's sitting by the window, light catching in her matted hair. Her fingers twitch over a half-finished tapestry, the needle still threaded. You ask her a few questions. She answers sharply, then coughs into her sleeve. Red spatters bloom instantly. You know that shade. You've seen it drip down chins, soak through pillowcases. You lean forward. How long has this been happening? She doesn't answer, just shakes her head like you're a fly buzzing in her ear. She won't go, the husband says quietly. Won't let me take her to the ward. You understand. The infirmary is a one-way stop. People go in, and if they're lucky, they leave in a cart. You kneel beside her. This close, you can see the bluish tint at her lips, the slight tremble in her chest. You could argue, beg, demand. Instead, you say, "Can I bless the cloth?" She eyes you, then nods. You raise a hand and whisper the old lines. Not quite scripture, not quite science. Just words you've heard said to dying people 100 times. When you leave, she's still working. Stitching feverishly, the thread dancing like it's trying to finish the story before her lungs give out. The next home offers a different challenge. A man stands guard outside with a pitchfork. His wife inside is coughing, and he doesn't want you near her. "We don't need no bird face," he growls. "She'll be fine." You explain gently that she might not be. She will, he snaps. It's just nerves. Or the turn of the moon. You've heard it blamed on everything. Bad air, swamp water, comets, even bad dreams. One man claimed his goat's sour milk was the true culprit. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in planetary influences or just used them as coping mechanisms. You suspect both. Eventually, the man lets you in, but only after you agree not to touch her. She lies on a straw pallet, eyes closed, lips moving faintly. Her breath rattles. You ask him when it started. He mutters, 3 days ago. Then adds, she never liked garlic, so maybe that's why. You check her anyway. From a distance. The bubo at her neck pulses like something alive. You leave garlic cloves by the window and suggest soaking her feet in rosewater. He thanks you. Not sarcastically. By now your legs ache from crouching, and your neck feels twisted from peering down that narrow beak all day. But there are more houses. Always more. At a scribe's home, you find a makeshift hospital. 5 beds, 1 servant, chaos. The scribe's trying to document the disease's spread. He wants to know who catches it first, which symptoms arrive in what order, how many days each person lasts. You admire the effort. You also know he's running out of ink, and he hasn't eaten in a day and a half. You give him 2 vials of elderflower tonic and promise to return. He nods, then promptly passes out into a page titled Chronicle of the Pestilence. Your last call is to a house with no markings and no answer. The door creaks open at your knock. Inside, a woman lies still on the floor. Nearby, a man sits against the wall, breathing heavily, eyes glazed. He holds a rosary in one hand, the other covered in blood. You step closer. He doesn't move. Then he says, hoarsely, she was already gone. You examine her. Stiff. Cold. And him? He's not far behind. You give him your last vial of spiced wine and help him lie flat. He smiles faintly. Never thought I'd go like this. Thought it'd be war, or something heroic. You say nothing. Just adjust the pillow under his head. As you turn to leave, he says, you'll write me down, won't you? You nod. Later, in your room, you do just that. You record his name, his words, his face, as best as you can remember it. Then you stop and stare at the page. The ink blots slightly, like it's weeping. You wonder how many more names your hand can hold. By now, the chalk dust is permanently embedded beneath your fingernails. You find flakes of it in your food, in your sheets, even on your sleeves despite wearing gloves. The chalk is a tool, yes, but more than that, it's a sentence. Once you draw that symbol on a door, you've carved an invisible wall between the living and the outside world. Today, you're not just visiting the sick. You're enforcing quarantine. This is one of your least favorite duties, which says a lot considering your other tasks involve slicing open boil-covered corpses and inhaling herbal steam laced with the screams of the dying. The city has ordered stricter lockdowns. Too many people have been slipping away from marked houses, desperate for food or company or just the illusion of fresh air. And now, the mayor wants to re-establish civic control. Which is a polite way of saying, trap people in their homes and hope they don't come clawing out. You're handed a scroll with a list of addresses. You and 2 city guards, both armed with spears, start toward the outer districts. They let you take the lead. No one argues with a bird mask. The first house has already been marked, a white C for confirmed case, added 3 days ago. But the door is ajar. You knock, then push it open slowly. Inside, 2 teenage boys stare at you, wide-eyed. They don't run, but they tremble as if your very presence will curse them. Where is your mother? You ask. They glance toward the back room. You go in. She's in bed, sheets soaked through with sweat, her breathing a wet rattle. Her eyes flutter open, then close again. You can feel the heat radiating off her even from a few paces away. Classic pneumonic. The deadliest kind. You step outside and speak to the boys softly. No visitors. No leaving. For 14 days. But we need food, one says. We haven't eaten since yesterday. You pull a small loaf from your satchel and hand it over. Boil water before you drink it. Every day. Then you slide the door shut. One of the guards hammers 2 thick wooden planks across it. He drives in the nails like he's sealing a coffin. The younger boy starts crying. You move on. The second house resists. A merchant's home. Large, expensive. You remember visiting his wife last week. She was showing symptoms. You advised isolation. Clearly, that advice was ignored. Now, he's on the porch yelling, "This is absurd. My wife is improving. There's no need for this." You step forward slowly. You were warned. The order is citywide. He scoffs. "Do I look like I belong with the poor horsens down in South Alley? I pay taxes." You're tempted to remind him that disease doesn't recognize tax brackets. But the guard at your side simply raises his spear, and the merchant goes quiet. Inside, his wife is barely conscious. Her skin is mottled, tongue dark. Her improvement was a lie or delusion. You place a hand on her wrist. Weak pulse. You cover her again and nod to the guards. This time, the merchant doesn't resist as the boards go up. But he doesn't go inside either. He stays on the stoop, watching as his door is sealed from the outside, locking his wife in. When you leave, he's still sitting there, hands shaking. Historians still argue whether these forced quarantines saved lives or simply delayed inevitable outbreaks. But in the moment, it feels like watching someone bury a family member alive. Slowly, legally, publicly. The third house on your list is already silent. You knock. No answer. One of the guards peers through a cracked shutter. They're all down. Every last one. You enter with caution. 4 bodies. 1 in a chair, 2 in a bed, and a child curled in a corner. Eyes open. Unmoving. You walk the perimeter, checking for signs of life. Nothing. But something feels off. Then you hear it. A whimper. You turn. Beneath a pile of blankets, a small movement. A girl, maybe 7, face flushed, eyes swollen nearly shut, but alive. You kneel beside her. "Are you alone?" you ask. She nods. Barely. You consider your options. Technically, you should leave her. Seal the house. Mark the door. But she's alive. You scoop her into your arms, carefully, keeping her covered, and carry her outside. The guards start to protest, but you fix them with a glare that speaks more clearly than any words through your mask. She gets a chance. They fall silent. You drop her at the infirmary, where one of the apprentices takes her in. You leave her name in the ledger, Annalise. Small, strong. Then you're back on the route. Some doors already have planks. You double-check them. Others have signs painted on by neighbors, crudely drawn skulls, or words like beware and UN Selen. You knock anyway. One house answers with a thrown brick. It misses your shoulder by inches and explodes against the wall behind you. A man leans out the second-floor window, shouting, "You're no better than the rats. Filthmonger." You take a deep breath, sweetened with rosemary and panic, and walk on. That's the thing about being a plague doctor. People think you're both savior and executioner. 1 minute, they beg for your herbs. The next, they chase you with pitchforks. You've heard stories. Doctors burned alive in villages, mistaken for witches or agents of the devil. Or maybe just blamed for being the only person brave, or foolish, enough to walk into a dying house. You mark 3 more doors. One family refuses to open up. You hear coughing inside. You leave food and seal them in anyway. By sunset, your chalk is worn to a nub. You stand at the last house, your arms heavy from the day. A young woman answers. She's alone. Her parents are already dead. She shows no signs. Yet. "Are you staying inside?" you ask. She nods. You hand her a fresh cloth soaked in lavender. Replace it when the smell fades. She clutches it like a relic. Then she says, "Thank you for coming." You're so startled you almost forget to write her name down. Back at the infirmary, the guards peel off, already complaining about the stench stuck in their clothes. You remove your gloves with slow precision and dump them into the vinegar bin. Your mask comes off last. You wash your face, eyes burning, and sit at your writing desk. You open the log and start a new page, quarantine rounds, day 18. You record each address, each family, each scream. You leave the little girl's name for last. Annalise, survival possible. You sit for a moment, staring at that line. Then you draw a tiny star beside it. Your hands are sore from holding the chalk all day. You flex your fingers. And you wonder, how many walls have you built today? And how many coffins? The first apple hits you square in the chest. You don't even see who threw it. One moment you're walking past the bakery, inspecting a new chalk mark on the doorframe. The next, a bruised, overripe missile splatters against your robes with a wet thunk. A brief silence follows, then a chorus of laughter, jeering voices from a second-story window. Bird-head freak. You bring death. Go back to hell. You don't respond. You don't even look up. Instead, you calmly brush the pulpy mess off your chest and keep walking, footsteps echoing too loudly in the narrow alley. This is the part they didn't mention when you signed that contract. Being hated more than the plague itself. The city is turning on you. At first, they were grateful, hopeful, even. When you arrived in the early days, people whispered reverently about the strange doctor from beyond the hills who dared approach the sick. You were a symbol of safety, a miracle in boots. Now, after weeks of death, after too many boarded doors and too few recoveries, you're a walking reminder that things are still very, very bad. And people need someone to blame. Today, the tension has a scent. Not just the usual rot and incense, but something sharper, more human. Sweat, fear, and fury. You visit the marketplace. What remains of it? Half the stalls are abandoned, the others manned by vendors who won't meet your gaze. One of them hawks miracle vinegar, claiming it was blessed by monks in Sicily. You stop, inspecting the bottle. It's cloudy, probably watered down. Useless. The vendor snarls, buy it or leave, plague breather. You leave. At the butcher's stall, a man waves a skinned rabbit like a sword when you approach. Don't curse my meat, he growls. You hold up your hands, palms out, backing away slowly. The last thing this city needs is a food riot sparked by an angry doctor and a flying rabbit. Back in the alley, you find graffiti scrawled in charcoal across a plaster wall. The doctor brings the death. Beneath it, a crude drawing of your mask. Someone's added devil horns and fangs. You pause longer than you mean to. Then you pull your stick from your belt and scrape the message away with the blunt end. The wall crumbles slightly under the pressure. You wonder how many more days it'll stand before decay, or fire, takes it. You're not alone in this, of course. Other plague doctors are feeling it too. One went missing last week. Rumor says he was chased out of a village by farmers who mistook his mask for a curse. Another was found tied to a post, stripped of his gear, with his ledger shoved in his mouth. You still don't know what happened to Dr. Emil. He left for the countryside to check a monastery. Never returned. All they found was his beaked mask, lying in a field of lavender. At midday, you attend to a family who summoned you urgently. The patient is a middle-aged woman, pale but feverish, with no visible swellings. You ask the husband what symptoms she's shown. He frowns. She's been having thoughts. You pause. Thoughts. She says things. Strange things. About death. About the rats. She says she sees crows watching us from the roof at night. You gently inspect her. She meets your eyes, calm and lucid. I'm not mad, she says softly. I'm scared. That's all. You nod. And then you realize what this is. The husband wants you to take her away, not because she's infected, but because she's inconvenient. You stand. She's not ill, you say, just tired. His eyes narrow. So you're useless, then. You don't answer. You leave. He slams the door behind you, and as you walk away, you hear something smash inside. Glass or pottery, probably. Another home, another mark. But this time, The resident refuses to open the door. No more lies. A voice calls. You say you help, but they all die. You try to explain. I'm only here to check. The door creaks open slightly, then slams shut again. I've seen your face in dreams, the voice hisses. I know what you are. You sigh. Another entry for the refused list. In the next street, someone hurls a bucket of what you hope is just dirty water from a window. It misses. Barely. You've stopped flinching at this point. You just wipe your mask and keep walking. You're not always the villain, though. At one house, an old man takes your hand, glove and all, and kisses it. You saved my grandson, he whispers. He still coughs, but he's alive. You nod. He presses a crust of bread into your satchel. Eat this when you're alone. Don't let them see. You don't cry, but later, when no one's looking, you break that bread in half and chew it slowly, like a prayer. Back at the infirmary, the other doctors are arguing again. One insists the townspeople need reassurance, a speech, perhaps, or a ceremony. Another says, what they need is to be reminded who's in charge. You say nothing. You're too tired for politics. Instead, you clean your tools, carefully rubbing down each one with vinegar and cloth. The lancet, the forceps, the amulets. All polished, all ready. You flip open your ledger and add the day's numbers. New infections, 12. Deaths, 8. Quarantines enforced, 6. Hostile encounters, 4. Gratitude received, 1. The last line feels heavier than the rest. You write one more note in the margins. The people hate me today. Perhaps tomorrow, they'll forget. But you know better. Tomorrow, the hate may grow sharper. Tomorrow, the stones might replace the apples. Still, when the sun goes down, and you're sure no one's watching, you step outside and whisper a quiet blessing at the feet of the graffiti-covered wall. Because part of you still believes it helps. Even if they never will. You hear the weeping before you see the house. It's thin and high-pitched, more a whimper than a cry, and it scrapes along the air like wind through a cracked shutter. You follow it through a narrow passage, the stone walls pressing in close enough to touch both sides with your elbows. The door is unmarked. That's unusual. Someone must have been missed on the last sweep. You knock, gently. No answer. You knock again. Then the latch lifts and the door creaks inward. A boy stands there. He might be 10. His eyes are wide and red-rimmed. Behind him, the smell is overpowering. Stale sweat, sickness, incense, and something sharp like metal left to rust in the sun. My mother's dying, he says. You step inside without a word. The room is dark. Someone's hung fabric over the windows, trying to keep the heat in or the death out. Either way, it's a tomb of a space. A single candle flickers on a low stool. On the bed lies a woman, her skin sunken, her mouth slack. She's breathing in short, staccato bursts. You move closer, kneeling beside her. She flinches when you speak her name. Elise, the boy says, but her eyes don't open. Her hand trembles in yours, fingers twitching, still holding on to some memory of movement. You glance at the boy. When did this start? He shrugs. 2 nights ago. She said she was just tired. You know what that means. She tried to hide it. Hoped she'd be strong enough to fight it alone. Maybe she didn't want to scare him. Maybe she didn't want you to come. You reach for your pouch and pull out a cloth soaked in herbs. You place it near her face. It's not medicine. Not really. It just smells cleaner than the room. Then, slowly, you speak. You say things you've said before. Reassurances. Words about calm, about peace, about rest. You aren't a priest. But people hear confessions anyway. Especially when they think you're the last voice they'll know. Elise murmurs something. You lean closer. It's a name. You whisper it back to her. She exhales. You're not sure if it's relief or surrender. Then, she's still. You close her eyes. The boy doesn't cry, not yet. He just stares at you, then at her, then back again. His face is blank, like someone pressed pause on his soul. Do I have to go with you now? he asks quietly. You pause. In truth, you should take him to the infirmary, or at least alert the city watch. Instead, you say, not yet. You give him instructions. Boil water. Burn the linens. Keep the door shut for a week. He nods and sits by her side, one small hand resting on her shoulder. As you leave, you mark the door, not with a skull, not with an X. You draw a simple line. Back on the main road, you're flagged down by a monk. He's young and soft-spoken, sleeves patched from too much washing. He asks if you'll visit the cloister. The sisters there are very ill, he says, though he doesn't elaborate. You nod and follow him. At the convent, the courtyard is quiet. Too quiet. The air smells like candle wax and wilted flowers. Inside, 3 nuns lie on mats in the prayer hall, each one paler than the last. 2 are feverish. The 3rd is still. Sister Marguerite was our healer, the monk says. She tried to care for the others. Of course she did. You kneel beside her body. Her hands are folded around a worn rosary, the beads slick with oil and use. Her face is peaceful. She must have known she was dying. You ask the monk for water. He brings it, and you help bathe the foreheads of the surviving nuns. They don't resist. Their eyes flutter open briefly, then close again. One of them whispers, "Are we being punished?" You pause. Historians still argue whether people of this time saw the plague as divine wrath or earthly imbalance. In your experience, most people think it's both. Punishment and plague. Guilt and germs. You answer the way you always do, no, just suffering. You leave them clean, wrapped in fresh cloth. They might die tonight, but they'll die as sisters, side by side, not alone in fear. At your next stop, there's a patient who won't die and doesn't want to live. He's in his 40s. Strong, healthy until recently. The fever's gone now, but the damage lingers. His left arm doesn't move. His breathing is uneven. He won't eat. He looks at you with hollow eyes. Why did I survive when my daughter didn't? You don't have an answer. Instead, you sit. You take out your ledger and ask if he wants to tell her story. He talks. Slowly, haltingly, but he talks. You write it all down. Her name was Clara. She liked drawing chickens. She always fed the cats, even the mean ones. She believed in angels. When you leave, he's eating a bit of bread. Not much, but enough. In the evening, you get called to the church crypts. A burial team is refusing to enter. There's something wrong, they say. You step down into the darkness, lantern held high. The bodies are lined in rows. Wrapped, labeled, organized. But one is missing. You find her behind a support beam. She's half-wrapped. Alive. Barely. You call for help, and together you lift her out. Her eyes flutter open, and she gasps for breath like someone returning from underwater. She was miscounted, the sexton mutters. I swear, I didn't know. You nod. You want to believe him. You bring her to the infirmary. She's still clinging to life. You place a cup of water near her lips. She sips, barely. You sit by her bed as the lantern burns low. She looks at you and says, "Are you deaf?" You shake your head. "No." You whisper, "Just the guy who walks beside him." She smiles, barely, and falls asleep. That night, you collapse onto your cot, bones aching, heart heavier than your mask. But something's different. You remember Elise's son. The way he sat beside her without fear. You remember the convent. The nuns trust in you. You remember Clara's father, eating again. You remember the woman in the crypt, breathing. And you realize, sometimes your job isn't to heal. It's just to witness, to sit, to listen, to stay when everyone else flees. You're not a miracle worker. You're not even always helpful. But you are there. And sometimes, that's enough. The wind shifts, and suddenly the entire city smells like fire. You follow the trail of smoke past the cathedral, past the square where children once played games with sticks and stones, before sticks became weapons and stones became warnings. The sky is a strange, bruised gray, and the air tastes like something ancient and scorched. Today is burial duty. You're not alone. A dozen others gather at the outskirts of town, where the newest plague pits you're open, shallow trenches waiting to be filled. Laborious, conscripts, gravediggers, even a few monks too weary to chant. No one speaks. The silence is loud, broken only by the creak of cart wheels and the distant ring of bells. Always the bells. Your boots sink slightly into the churned-up soil. The ground is damp from last night's rain, and every step feels like wading through something thick with secrets. A cart arrives, pulled by a gaunt horse with eyes like polished stones. It's stacked high with bodies, loosely wrapped in linen or bundled in whatever cloth the family could find. Some are labeled with names. Most aren't. You recognize one. It's Clara's father, the man who told you her stories. You pause, hand resting on the side of the cart. His eyes are closed. His jaw is tied shut with a ribbon of cloth. Someone cared enough to do that. You nod once. A farewell. The others begin unloading. You help. Each body is passed from gloved hand to gloved hand, then lowered into the pit. It's methodical, grim, oddly sacred. There's no time for ceremony, no time for last rites. But there's rhythm, reverence. One man whispers a prayer with every body he places. Another hums a tune you recognize from church, though the words are long forgotten. A young apprentice, no older than 14, vomits behind a tree. You pat his shoulder and keep working. The pit fills slowly. Bodies settle atop one another like waves frozen mid-crash. Limbs intertwined. Faces turned upward, downward, sideways, caught in whatever final expression the disease left them with. You wonder what it must feel like to be buried among strangers. Or worse, among enemies. Somewhere to your left, a priest recites a psalm from memory. His voice cracks halfway through. You don't think it's from age. Another cart arrives. Then another. The gravediggers start lighting torches. Not for light, there's plenty of that now, the sun clawing its way through the haze, but for the burnings. Some bodies are too far gone. The pits are full. The risk of contagion too high. So they burn them. One by one, the carts are dragged to the edge of the clearing, and the pyres are stacked. Wood, cloth, limbs. Someone throws a bundle of dried rosemary on top. Tradition, maybe, or guilt. The fire catches quickly. The flames leap like dancers in panic. Heat presses against your mask, drying the inside of your nostrils, cracking your lips. The smoke rises in thick, black columns, blocking the sky, staining the clouds. You try not to breathe too deeply. The herbs in your mask help, but not enough. You back away. You've seen bodies burn before. At the start, it was done in secret. Families too afraid to admit their loved one was sick. They'd torch the house in the dead of night. Whisper prayers through closed windows. Now it's sanctioned. Expected. The fire is not shame anymore, it's policy. And still, the smell lingers. Even as you return to the city. Even as you wash your gloves and change your robe. Even as you eat a thin stew by candlelight and sip wine from a tin cup. You can still smell them. That night, your shift continues. The death toll didn't pause while you handled the pits. You're called to a tenement where 5 families share one hallway. A woman greets you at the door, breathless and shivering. She doesn't have the plague, just panic. They're burning people, she says. Is it true? You nod. She grips your arm. Don't let them burn my son. You don't promise her anything. You just walk past and check him. The boy is barely conscious. His fever is high, but not irreversible. You give him bark shavings and a cloth soaked in rainwater. You adjust the sheets and prop his head on a folded coat. He needs clean air, you say, and quiet. They'll give him one of the two. Maybe. Another home. Another father collapsed by the hearth. His wife clutches your sleeve, asking if it's too late. You tell her it's never too late. It's a lie, but she clings to it like driftwood. Later, you pass through the cathedral square and see 2 men building a bonfire. Smaller than the ones for bodies, but with the same grim efficiency. You ask what it's for. Books, one says. Tainted pages. Old remedies. The bishop said they spread false hope. You glance at the pile. Manuscripts, herbal guides, even a few journals like your own. You want to argue, but what's the point? False hope can be a contagion, too. Still, that night, you copy a few pages from your ledger into a hidden notebook. Just in case. Just before sleep, a knock comes at your door. It's the young apprentice from the pit, the one who vomited. He holds a bundle in his arms. It's a wrapped corpse. Small. My sister, he says. She was alone. I thought she deserved better. You light a candle. You help him wash her. Wrap her again, carefully. You whisper a blessing. Then you take her yourself to the nearest pit. No cart, no guards. Just you, alone in the dark, lowering her gently into the earth. You cover her with soil, pat it smooth with your bare hands. And when you return to your cot, your gloves still stained with ash, you write her name down. Not because it's required, because someone should. They say there's a cure in the hills. You hear it first from a tanner's wife who swears her cousin boiled a certain moss with snail shells and walked out of death's shadow like a new man. Then a spice merchant tells you about a monastery 2 days' ride from the city, where monks brew a honey wine tincture said to banish plague from the blood. Finally, a boy with soot-streaked cheeks presses a scrap of parchment into your hand. Asterisk healing herbs found north, near the Black Spring. Asterisk. You know better. And yet, you pack your bag. Not because you believe in magic moss or sacred wine, but because standing still feels worse. The infirmary is at capacity. Half your colleagues have vanished, some to fever, others to fear. Your ledger is full of names. Too many names. And so, before dawn, you slip through the gates and follow the road east, into the woods, toward the hills that whisper of hope. The air is different outside the city. Quieter, but not peaceful. The silence feels like a held breath. You pass a field of abandoned wagons, wheels sunken in mud. Crows perch atop the canvas covers, watching you with indifferent eyes. Further on, a well has been sealed with stones, a crude cross painted on the lintel. You don't stop to check what's inside. You reach a village by mid-morning. It's mostly empty, shutters nailed shut, livestock penned and bleating to no one. A woman leans from a second-story window and throws you a loaf of stale bread. You'll find nothing here, she calls. Not unless death's what you're chasing. You thank her anyway. The trail winds into forest. The trees crowd close together, and for a moment, you lose the sky. Only your stick tapping the path reminds you that you're moving forward. Eventually, you reach a clearing where the earth bubbles faintly. A warm spring, just as the boy's note described. The water is dark and smells of iron. You kneel, dip a finger in, sniff it. Nothing extraordinary, nothing sacred. You take a sample anyway. Nearby, you find the herbs. They're growing wild, stubbornly, basil, marjoram, hyssop. You recognize some from your manuals. Others are strangers. You pluck them carefully, wrapping each sprig in cloth. Maybe they'll do nothing. Maybe they'll be miracles. At least it's something new. You camp that night under an old oak tree. The stars blink cold and far above you. Without the city's bells, the world is quieter, but your thoughts are not. You wonder how many have died since you left. You wonder if the girl in the infirmary, the one with the soft humming voice, is still breathing. You dream of boiling moss and pouring it over open wounds. In the dream, people wake smiling. No one coughs. You don't wear a mask. The next morning, you find the monastery. It's carved into the mountainside. It's stone dark with moss and thyme. The gate creaks open at your knock, and a monk, grey-robed, red-eyed, greets you. We've heard rumors, you say. We've spread them, he replies. You blink. He laughs softly. They come seeking hope. We give them rest. That's all. You're invited in. Inside, it smells like wax and rosemary. The halls echo with footsteps and whispered Latin. You're led to the apothecary. Shelves lined with jars, bundles of dried plants, rows of tinctures labeled with shaky Latin and even shakier promises. You explain what you've heard. The monk nods. We try what we can, he says. Infusions, compresses, wine steeped in rosemary. It works. Sometimes. For a while. You ask about the honey wine. He hands you a small bottle. Placebo, he says, but it tastes good. You leave with a basket of herbs and a book of recipes, hand-copied and ink-stained. Before you go, the monk places a hand on your shoulder. Hope isn't a cure, he says, but sometimes it delays the grave. You nod. You believe him. The return journey is longer. Your bag is heavier. Not with proof, but with possibility. You stop at a burnt-out village. The ground is blackened, ash clinging to the fence posts like snow. A few graves are marked with stones and names carved in chalk. You kneel beside one and leave a sprig of hyssop. In the next town, you meet a midwife who asks if you've brought news. You hand her a vial of your newest concoction, a mixture of 3 herbs from the forest and a drop of wine. What do I tell them it is? She asks. Strength, you say. By the time you return to the city, the guards at the gate barely recognize you. You're thinner, tired. You smell like smoke and pine. At the infirmary, there are fewer patients. Not because they've gotten better. The apprentices help you prepare the herbs. You make teas, steams, compresses. You apply them carefully, watch reactions. You wait. A girl stops coughing. A boy opens his eyes. A woman drinks your tincture and smiles, saying it reminds her of childhood. You write everything down, dosages, results, side effects. You draw sketches of the leaves, annotate every batch. You don't claim it's a cure, but it helps. At least, more than anything else has. Later that week, a rival doctor visits. He peers at your herbs with suspicion. You think flowers will save us. You shrug. They're not worse than bleeding people. He doesn't argue. You share your notes. He copies your dosages into his book. That night, you sit on the infirmary steps and breathe in the city. Still thick with rot and fear, but now tinged with rosemary and boiling tea. You think about the monk in the mountain. About hope. About how it's not a cure. But it's not nothing. And in times like these, not nothing is as close to a miracle as anyone gets. They say there's a cure in the hills. You hear it first from a tanner's wife who swears her cousin boiled a certain moss with snail shells and walked out of death's shadow like a new man. Then a spice merchant tells you about a monastery 2 days' ride from the city, where monks brew a honey wine tincture said to banish plague from the blood. Finally, a boy with soot-streaked cheeks presses a scrap of parchment into your hand. Healing herbs found north, near the Black Spring. You know better. And yet, you pack your bag. Not because you believe in magic moss or sacred wine, but because standing still feels worse. The infirmary is at capacity. Half your colleagues have vanished, some to fever, others to fear. Your ledger is full of names. Too many names. And so, before dawn, you slip through the gates and follow the road east, into the woods, toward the hills that whisper of hope. The air is different outside the city. Quieter, but not peaceful. The silence feels like a held breath. You pass a field of abandoned wagons, wheels sunken in mud. Crows perch atop the canvas covers, watching you with indifferent eyes. Further on, a well has been sealed with stones, a crude cross painted on the lintel. You don't stop to check what's inside. You reach a village by mid-morning. It's mostly empty, shutters nailed shut, livestock penned and bleating to no one. A woman leans from a second-story window and throws you a loaf of stale bread. You'll find nothing here, she calls. Not unless death's what you're chasing. You thank her anyway. The trail winds into forest. The trees crowd close together, and for a moment, you lose the sky. Only your stick tapping the path reminds you that you're moving forward. Eventually, you reach a clearing where the earth bubbles faintly. A warm spring, just as the boy's note described. The water is dark and smells of iron. You kneel, dip a finger in, sniff it. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing sacred. You take a sample anyway. Nearby, you find the herbs. They're growing wild, stubbornly. Basil, marjoram, hyssop. You recognize some from your manuals. Others are strangers. You pluck them carefully, wrapping each sprig in cloth. Maybe they'll do nothing. Maybe they'll be miracles. At least it's something new. You camp that night under an old oak tree. The stars blink cold and far above you. Without the city's bells, the world is quieter, but your thoughts are not. You wonder how many have died since you left. You wonder if the girl in the infirmary, the one with the soft humming voice, is still breathing. You dream of boiling moss and pouring it over open wounds. In the dream, people wake smiling. No one coughs. You don't wear a mask. The next morning, you find the monastery. It's carved into the mountainside. It's stone dark with moss and thyme. The gate creaks open at your knock, and a monk, grey-robed, red-eyed, greets you. "We've heard rumors," you say. "We've spread them," he replies. You blink. He laughs softly. "They come seeking hope. We give them rest. That's all." You're invited in. Inside, it smells like wax and rosemary. The halls echo with footsteps and whispered Latin. You're led to the apothecary. Shelves lined with jars, bundles of dried plants, rows of tinctures labeled with shaky Latin and even shakier promises. You explain what you've heard. The monk nods. "We try what we can," he says. "Infusions, compresses, wine steeped in rosemary. It works. Sometimes. For a while." You ask about the honey wine. He hands you a small bottle. "Placebo," he says, "but it tastes good." You leave with a basket of herbs and a book of recipes, hand-copied and ink-stained. Before you go, the monk places a hand on your shoulder. "Hope isn't a cure," he says, "but sometimes it delays the grave." You nod. You believe him. The return journey is longer. Your bag is heavier. Not with proof, but with possibility. You stop at a burnt-out village. The ground is blackened, ash clinging to the fence posts like snow. A few graves are marked with stones and names carved in chalk. You kneel beside one and leave a sprig of hyssop. In the next town, you meet a midwife who asks if you've brought news. You hand her a vial of your newest concoction, a mixture of 3 herbs from the forest and a drop of wine. "What do I tell them it is?" she asks. "Strength," you say. By the time you return to the city, the guards at the gate barely recognize you. You're thinner, tired. You smell like smoke and pine. At the infirmary, there are fewer patients. Not because they've gotten better. The apprentices help you prepare the herbs. You make teas, steams, compresses. You apply them carefully, watch reactions. You wait. A girl stops coughing. A boy opens his eyes. A woman drinks your tincture and smiles, saying it reminds her of childhood. You write everything down: dosages, results, side effects. You draw sketches of the leaves, annotate every batch. You don't claim it's a cure, but it helps. At least, more than anything else has. Later that week, a rival doctor visits. He peers at your herbs with suspicion. You think flowers will save us. You shrug. They're not worse than bleeding people. He doesn't argue. You share your notes. He copies your dosages into his book. That night, you sit on the infirmary steps and breathe in the city. Still thick with rot and fear, but now tinged with rosemary and boiling tea. You think about the monk in the mountain. About hope. About how it's not a cure. But it's not nothing. And in times like these, not nothing is as close to a miracle as anyone gets. Sleep no longer comes easily. When it does, it creeps in sideways, like a thief or a ghost, then departs before your body even has time to rest. Lately, it feels less like sleep and more like falling into strange, jumbled fragments of memory. You don't dream of gardens or sunlit fields. You dream of eyes. Eyes open when they shouldn't be. Eyes staring from plague carts. Eyes blinking in the dark, set into the beaks of other masks. Masks that aren't worn by you. Sometimes you wake with your hands clenched around your walking stick. Sometimes you wake in the hallway, still fully dressed. Tonight is no exception. You drift off somewhere between cleaning your lancet and reorganizing your herb pouches. Your head slumps forward at your desk, cheek pressed against your ledger. When you stir hours later, ink is dried on your face and your fingers are numb. You sit up slowly. The candle burned down long ago, leaving a stub of wax clinging to the holder like a dying flame's last breath. You light a new one. The shadows don't retreat. Instead, they shift, stretch, gather in the corners. The infirmary is quiet, but not silent. There's always something, wood creaking, wind squeezing through the stonework, distant coughing from the far beds. The world doesn't go still anymore. Not truly. You step outside into the courtyard for air. The sky is overcast, the moon buried behind clouds. The walls loom tall and quiet. You walk slowly, gloved hands clasped behind your back. And then you see her. Just a flicker of movement, a shadow slipping behind the chapel wall. You pause. "Who's there?" you call softly. No answer. You follow, cautiously, boots scuffing the cobblestones. At the corner, you see nothing. Just the empty garden where rosemary bushes lean sideways like drunkards. But in the center of the courtyard is a bench. And on that bench is something small and strange. Your mask. Not a copy. Your mask. The one you left on your desk, beside your herbs. You blink. You approach slowly. The mask sits still, undisturbed. Its beak tilts up slightly, as if staring at you with invisible eyes. You pick it up. It's cold. Back inside, the infirmary feels wrong. Too quiet. You recheck the beds. The patients are all sleeping, or still, or gone. One bed is empty. You check the ledger, no record of release. Your heart quickens. You find the boy's blanket folded neatly on the bed. His shoes are gone. So is his nameplate. You don't remember writing him off. But there it is, in your own handwriting, discharged. You didn't do that. You sit at your desk and flip through the ledger. The names blur. You see entries you don't remember making. Symbols in the margins you never use. A small drawing of a crow you're sure you didn't sketch. You close the book. You press your palms to your temples. You breathe in, clove, rosemary, sweat, ink. You breathe out, and with it comes a whisper. Not from your mouth. From behind you. You spin. No one. You leave the infirmary. You walk the streets, now nearly empty. The bell stopped tolling sometime after midnight. It ran out of rope, they said. Or the bell ringer gave up. A dog follows you for a block, then turns into mist and vanishes. Probably your imagination. But you glance over your shoulder 5 times just to be sure. You pass a window. Your reflection stares back at you. Beaked mask, heavy robes, walking stick in hand. Except you're not wearing the mask. And your stick is still at home. You step back. The reflection doesn't move. You blink. It's gone. Later, you visit the convent. The 2 surviving nuns are asleep. But a third figure sits at the edge of the pews, head bowed, hands folded. You walk closer. Her veil is immaculate. Her skin is luminous. She raises her head and meets your eyes. Her face is Elise's. You flinch. Elise is dead, you whisper. She says nothing, just holds your gaze. Then she opens her mouth and says your name. Your real name. The one no one in this city knows. You stumble backward, knocking over a candlestick. It clatters. The noise echoes too loud. When you look back, she's gone. You don't sleep that night. The next morning, you attend to your patients with trembling hands. You prescribe tea, apply balms, clean wounds. You say kind words. You nod when people cry. But your fingers shake. You see a girl who died last week helping another to drink water. You see Dr. Emile in a window reflection, though he never came back. You see the faces you couldn't save every time you blink. You try to write it off. Fatigue, stress, the toll of too many bodies and too few cures. But something's cracking inside you. That night, you sit on the roof of the infirmary, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring at the stars. You whisper apologies into the wind. Names. Regrets. You wonder if grief has its own disease vector. If guilt is contagious. If so, you've caught a terminal case. At dawn, you find a note pinned to your door. No name. Just one sentence. You're not death, but has begun to wear your shape. You fold the note, tuck it into your ledger, and keep going, because there are still names left to write, and someone has to witness. It starts with your fingers. They ache, which is nothing new. But this ache is different, deeper. Like the bones inside are trying to whisper something. You flex your hands. The joints crack. The gloves feel tighter than usual. You convince yourself it's just overuse. Another week of writing, lifting, binding wounds. You soak your fingers in warm rosemary water and keep going. But by nightfall, your hands are trembling. You sleep fitfully. Your dreams are crowded. Old patients return, those who died, those who lived, those whose names you can't quite recall. They speak in riddles, all wearing your mask. At one point, you wake gasping, clutching your chest, convinced your mask has melted onto your face. When morning comes, your breath is ragged. You try to hide it. You don't tell anyone. You suit up, methodically. Gloves, robes, mask. No one sees the sweat slicking your collarbone. No one hears the wheeze behind the beak. You tell yourself it's a passing chill, a reaction to the smoke, the stress. But by noon, your ribs ache every time you inhale. Your back feels leaden, your limbs slow. You visit 2 homes. You examine a young girl with mild fever and cough. You recommend compresses, steam, and whisper hope to her mother. Then you leave and lean against the outer wall, legs shaking. You feel hot. Your forehead pulses. You press gloved fingers under your arms. There's something there, round, tender, swollen. You don't check twice. You already know. You return to the infirmary and lock your room. You strip layer by layer, carefully, as if each fold of fabric might turn to dust. Your shirt sticks to your skin with sweat. Your chest is mottled red. Your neck throbs. The swelling is unmistakable now, egg-sized, angry, alive. You sit on your cot, bare from the waist up, and stare at the wall. You whisper the phrase aloud, softly, as though saying it might make it unreal. I have the plague. It doesn't sound dramatic. It sounds quiet, inevitable. Your first instinct is to burn everything. Your gloves, your robe, your books. But you don't. Not yet. You begin a new page in your ledger. Self-diagnosis. Date, unknown. Symptoms, low-grade fever. Swelling, left axilla. Chest tightness. Onset approximate 12 hours prior. Prognosis, uncertain. You write with slow precision, hands trembling. You list your possible options. Tinctures, poultices, isolation. You underline that last word. Then, you seal the page with a ribbon of red ink. You notify no one, but you do move yourself to the back cell, the one used for quarantined clergy. No one goes in there now. You gather what you need: herbs, vinegar, your favorite blanket, the carved wooden cup from the convent. You don't know what kind of doctor this next version of you will be. As the fever rises, time softens. You drift in and out. You hallucinate. You see your childhood kitchen, your mother making onion soup. You smell the broth. You feel the sting of fresh garlic. Then the image fades, and you're lying in sweat-drenched sheets, throat on fire. You talk aloud, answering no one. Once, you reach out and feel the hand of someone beside you. You open your eyes. No one's there. You lose count of the days. You wake once to find your notes scattered on the floor, your handwriting looping and frantic across a dozen pages. Another time, you find a dried sprig of lavender tucked behind your ear. You didn't put it there. One night, a voice whispers your name. It's your own voice, but older, stronger. You answer, I'm still here. Eventually, the fever breaks. It doesn't feel like a victory, more like a slow unraveling. You open your eyes to see sunlight on the wall. Your mouth is dry, your ribs ache, but your lungs breathe. You sit up slowly. The swelling has gone down. Your limbs are heavy, but yours again. You step outside, barefoot, into the infirmary corridor. No one is there. Just the echo of your footsteps. The infirmary has not collapsed. The city still breathes. Somehow, both you and the world have survived another round. You wash your face. You trim your beard. You scrub your hands until your skin burns. Then, you walk back to your desk and write one word under your last entry. Recovery. Historians still argue whether plague survivors developed immunity, or whether survival was just a matter of luck, strength, and sheer stubbornness. You don't care which it was. You lived. And now, you wonder what that means. You stare at your mask. You wonder whether to put it back on, whether to walk the streets again, whether to start a new ledger, or end the old one with your own name. That night, you return to the infirmary hall. There are fewer patients. The ones who remain stare at you with something like recognition. Or hope. A boy touches your robe as you pass. "Birdman," he whispers. "You came back." You nod. You press a hand to your chest, where the swelling once was. And you whisper back, "So did you." There's a different weight to your steps now. Not lighter. Not exactly heavier either. But altered. As if surviving the plague didn't remove a burden, it just rearranged it. You walk without your old certainty. Every street feels a little unfamiliar, even though you've mapped them 100 times in sweat and soot and chalk. When you reappear on the main avenue in full gear again, leather robes, bird mask polished to a dull sheen, satchel freshly packed, the people notice. Whispers follow you like shadows. "He came back. Didn't he die? He must be protected." Others glance away, not out of fear, but superstition. Some believe a plague doctor who survives the plague becomes half-spirit. Neither cursed nor blessed. Just other. You start your rounds again. At first, you're hesitant. Not because you're afraid of reinfection, though that lingers, but because something in you has changed. You're slower to speak, gentler with your stick, more deliberate when placing a compress or adjusting a fevered head. Your hands remember what it felt like to shake. Your lungs remember drowning. And so you're softer now, but not weaker. The city is changing, too. The streets are still littered with refuse, but fewer carts carry corpses. The bells ring less frequently. You still see boarded doors, but more of them bear fading chalk marks, old quarantine signs now weathered by rain. The air smells of ash and sweat. Yes, but also of bread again. One morning, you pass a bakery and smell cinnamon. You stop in your tracks. The baker, a boy no older than 16, catches your glance and offers you a warm roll, no charge. You accept. It burns your tongue and tastes like memory. You visit homes now where the sick are recovering. Not everyone, not always, but enough. People are learning. Boil the linens. Wash with vinegar. Burn herbs. Breathe deeply. They still call for you, but less in panic and more in ritual. You are still needed, but not solely feared. You find Elise's son again. He's older now, just by weeks, but his posture has changed. He helps you carry supplies from house to house. He doesn't flinch when people cough. One day, he asks if he can watch you lance a bubo. You hesitate, but then you let him. You show him how to light the iron, how to time the incision, how to murmur calming things that mean very little but somehow help. He doesn't faint. He doesn't gag. When it's done, you look at him and say, "You'll be better than me one day." He doesn't answer, but his smile tells you he believes it. Your work shifts. No longer just medicine. You become a teacher, a keeper of stories, a connector of names and places and small victories. You write more, carefully documenting which mixtures worked, which failed. You start separating your ledger into chapters. You even give the herbs nicknames to help others remember: sleepweed for valerian, gut thorn for gentian root. You send copies to other infirmaries. You ride out with riders who spread your notes to neighboring towns. You inscribe margins with jokes, small sketches, snippets of patient quotes. A kind of grim humor journal. One entry reads, "Bald merchant claimed garlic stuffed in ears prevents plague. Now he can't hear and still coughs. A double loss." Another, "Old widow insists hugging her cat cured her. Might be right. Cat looks smug. Laughter returns. Not often. Not loud. But it happens. A girl giggles when you mistake her wooden horse for a sick goat. A man recovering from fever asks if he can commission a smaller mask for his dog just in case. Someone paints your silhouette, long coat, wide hat, pointed mask, on a wall beside the market. Beneath it, they write, "He stayed." You see it one evening while walking home. You stare at it for a long time. Then, with your gloved hand, you draw a tiny smile under the beak. One night, the city holds a vigil. Not a celebration, no one dares that yet, but a vigil of candles. People line the streets. They don't sing. They just stand. In silence. Holding light. You stand too. Behind your mask. Holding yours. You remember every name in your ledger. Every door you marked. Every patient who whispered your name in their final breath. Every child who coughed and lived. The firelight dances in the beak's glass eyes. No one speaks to you. But one woman, just one, passes by and touches your shoulder gently. Not as a plea, but in thanks. Later, back at the infirmary, you remove your gear. You stare at your own reflection in a basin of water. You touch the faint scar where your bubo once throbbed. You murmur, "I lived." And then you ask the question that's haunted you since. Now what? Because what comes after death? Not yours, everyone else's. What comes after you become a symbol? A story whispered in the streets? You clean your gloves. You press herbs. You boil water. And you keep going. Because healing isn't an end. It's a loop. A cycle. A prayer on repeat. And your hands still know how to hold it. It's strange. This thing called retirement. You don't announce it. No one throws a feast. There are no official scrolls. Just one morning, you wake up, stretch your legs, and realize, for the first time in over a year, you're not expected anywhere. The city breathes differently now. The death toll has dropped. The infirmary has space between the beds again. The herbs on the apothecary shelves are no longer rationed. And the bell tolls only once a day now. A farewell, not a warning. You still wear the robes. People expect it. When they see the mask, they still move aside. Still bow their heads. Some of the children even wave. But you wear it less often. Sometimes you walk the streets without it, barefaced, breathing the air like it's been forgiven. Your face looks different now. Thinner. Lined. Your eyes are tired in ways no tincture can soothe. But they're yours. Still yours. You return the official scroll to the city clerk. The contract you signed under moonlight and desperation. The one that promised danger and vague compensation. He nods and doesn't meet your gaze. His lost weight, too. You offer him your mask. He shakes his head. You keep it, he murmurs. You earned it. You do. You take it home. You mount it above your desk like a relic. Its beak is cracked slightly at the tip, the result of too many scrapes, too many falls. The lenses are scratched, but they still catch the light at certain angles. It's not beautiful, but it's sacred. You spend your days walking the alleys that once made you tremble. Now, you stop to talk. You chat with bakers and barbers. You accept soup from old widows. You buy apples, fresh ones this time, from a boy who once painted a bird mask on a wall. Sometimes people ask for advice. My daughter's coughing. Should I burn rosemary or thyme? How do you know when it's serious? You answer gently, patiently, but you no longer carry the ledger. That's for someone else now. Annalise, maybe. She's 17 now, apprenticing under the new city physician. Sharp eyes, steady hands, doesn't flinch at blood. She lances buboes like she's born for it. You think she just might be. Elise's son, Martin, works with the infirmary, too. He handles logistics, supplies, orders vinegar by the barrel. He whistles when he works. A low, tuneless whistle that somehow calms the wards. Once, he asks if he can see your notes. You hand them over without hesitation. He reads them all. Every name, every sketch, every strange margin annotation. He adds his own. Sometimes you see your past in him. Other times, you hope you don't. You receive a letter one day, sealed in red wax. It's from a town 2 days north. They've heard of your work. They ask if you'll consult. Just for a short while. They're offering coin. And lodging. And something more important. Trust. You hold the letter in your lap for hours. You don't go. But you write back. You send your recipes. Your ratios. Your thoughts on steam infusions and the psychological effects of eye contact through glass. You finish with a single line, you don't need a mask to help. Just patience. You spend your afternoons in the courtyard of the old infirmary. The garden's growing now. Lavender. Marigold. A stubborn patch of sage. You help tend it. One day, a small boy tugs your sleeve. Were you the one who fought the plague? You smile. I walked beside it. Did you win? You kneel beside him. Not alone. But I didn't run. He thinks about that for a long time. Then he offers you a dried flower, slightly crushed. You take it. On your quietest days, you sit on your stoop and listen. The city is never silent. But now, it hums instead of howls. You hear merchants calling. You hear boots on cobblestone. You hear children laughing, loudly, openly, as if they've never heard the word quarantine. You hear life. One night, you light a candle and read from your ledger. You pause at names. You remember faces. You murmur stories into the air like prayers. The girl who hummed while dying. The man who refused to leave his wife's side. The nun who smiled at you even when she knew. The boy who hugged his cat and lived. You close the book. You don't lock it away. You leave it open on your desk, for anyone who needs to remember. Because someone always will. Because memories can be medicine, too. And because healing never really ends. Not even when the plague does. So now, as the candle burns low, and your mask rests quietly on the wall, take a slow breath in. Let the weight of those long roads and heavy robes fade from your shoulders. The air is safer now. The streets are softer. And though the scars of what you've seen may never fade, they don't need to, because they're proof that you stayed when it mattered most. Feel the quiet settle around you like a blanket. The kind spun not from cloth, but from time and truth and gentleness hard-earned. Listen to the silence, because it's not empty. It's full of every life you witnessed, every soul you soothed, every word you wrote so they wouldn't be forgotten. You're not alone. You never were. Let that be your peace. Let that be your rest.